A near empty shoe, but hopefully not a completely empty shoe. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Buckeyes as we do each and every week. We believe we've got the very best in Ohio State talk right here with Tony Gerdeman at the top from Buckeyes Scoop, and also, of course, Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports Bucknuts. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Excellent. Again, we let everyone know that we cannot be completely consistent with our time and day each and every week. We've got these two. We've got myself, typically Kevin Noon, to organize and coordinate schedules. So that's why it's important to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications. That way you know we're going live and when this week, Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern time. All right. So it was announced just a few days ago, guys, that Ohio Stadium would be at the most 20% occupied by fans. That's been speculation for months, of course, ever since this whole world broke loose in regards to how many people would be allowed in Ohio Stadium due to social distancing. 20%, 100,000, 20%. Well, it's 107, I believe, is I don't think official, but that's how many actually make it into the building and have the past couple of years, Steve. So let's start with you in regards to what the guidelines are and if there's any other guidelines in addition to just the straight 20% capacity rule.
Yeah, I think they're kind of starting with that as a guidepost right now, and they're not guaranteeing that there'll be anybody at the games, to be quite honest. Basically just saying that that's their hope, I guess, as of right now, and that they've offered people the chance to forego their tickets this year in lieu of a donation, tax deductible, I presume, to the athletic department. And beside that, have limited the number of tickets each ticket buyer could have. They had kind of a sliding scale. If you're between 2 and 10 tickets, you're going to get 2 per game, it would seem. So, I don't know how it's all going to shake out. Obviously, they got to leave some room for the students as well to attend these games. And I think that's going to be something that they're going to have to work through, I guess, as they get into this. But, yeah, it's a new frontier, certainly. And I think what people need to understand is this is not your normal year. And that, if you don't get to go to all the games this year, then there's a very good reason why.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the limitations of the capacity that Ohio State announced. There's no skull session, no tailgating. Everybody in attendance will have to wear masks and observe the social distancing rules and just be mindful of each other. So it's not the new normal, but maybe for just this year, it's what's going to have to happen. And just looking at all of the different rules of how the people with 20 season tickets or more on average will now be guaranteed no more than a maximum of 8 season tickets. And so there's a lot of money people in Columbus and around Ohio who are used to getting whatever they want in terms of tickets, and they've paid for them for years and years, and now they're going to be cut way down. And I'm just imagining, some of these Central Ohio millionaires who are going to have to decide which 3 people to share their normal 20 tickets with, and it may not make for some comfortable conversations this fall.
When I envision putting limitations on capacity, I would think it would be even more important to do the social distancing in regards to, okay, if you're going to allow 20 to 25,000 people into a stadium, that's a lot of people, and they could be shoulder to shoulder, or there could be time increments in which you allow, you could open up all the gates and obviously distribute only in several hundred at each gate, line up every 20 minutes, and so forth and so on. And you need to wait at this other holding spot before you then proceed to the gate, et cetera, that would be almost as important as how many people are actually in the stadium.
Yeah, no, yeah. And there's also limited concessions. And a lot of this, back when we talked to Gene Smith this spring, when he said 22,000, he was talking about it's also about the square footage of the building and the rules that have been laid down there, where the concourses and concessions and bathrooms, and the gates, just like you said, Mark, all of these different areas. It's not just the seating at all. It's everywhere in the building where they're trying to limit the number of people, and 20, no more than 20% is what Ohio State. Those were the words, no more than 20%. So that's the high end, and hopefully they can hit it. But I would be surprised if anything happens on the high end right now.
Florida State fan Phil's in the conversation, along with Pinero 5 Piru. Go Blue in the live chat, of course. El Gallo Negro. We've got Cheryl, big Buckeyes fan, who's asking the first question of the day in regards to the band and the cheerleaders, which when it comes to a game experience in college football, there's nothing like the band and the cheerleaders adding support to the team, and also obviously more so for the crowd itself. And if there would be no spectators in the stadium, I could still think there would be a need for a, not necessarily a need for it, but it would supplement the environment for a television spectacle. But now that we could have potentially 20 to 25,000 in the stadium, still the cheerleaders and the band, Steve, they're certainly an integral part of the game experience.
Yeah, I think that you'll probably have a spirit squad, I presume, down on the field, I guess, or perhaps up in the stands somewhere, and everything can be socially distant. So what they could do is take several sections. My guess is they're going to put these fans in the camera shot so that for Ohio Stadium, they shoot from the west side to the east side. So my guess is the fans will be on the east side primarily of the stadium in the camera shot so that it looks good on television, spaced out as well as they can. And then I think with the band, you could take, a good portion of the south stands by the stadium or by the scoreboard and spread the band out socially distanced 6-8 feet apart, and they could play their music down there. I don't know that you'll have them in marching formation on the field, which is an important part of Ohio State, obviously with the Script Ohio and everything else that they do. But it's a different day and time, and I don't think they're going to do anything that takes any kind of risks this year. I know here in Ohio, they abolished preseason scrimmages for high school football, and that's frustrated some football coaches here. But I think that they did that to preserve the chance of having a 10-game regular season as scheduled. And, if there's an outbreak at a scrimmage, then they're going to probably cancel the next week's game. So, which could be the opener. So I think they're taking every precaution that they can to assure that there'll be some type of a season. And again, I think it all comes back in terms of college football, in terms of the money. I mean, Division III, Division II, a lot of those leagues are out right now. A lot of the 1AA leagues are out and gone because their only source of revenue for those teams are the gate receipts. And, people may not be able to attend the games. So why bother staging them? Whereas with the, football bowl subdivision 1A, you have at least the television component that can pay some of the freight. So, I think that's the hope, at least from the Big Ten standpoint, that they could maintain at least a 10-game season and give television some type of inventory. And like Tony said, we're hoping to hear the schedule any day now from the Big Ten. And, this will be my pet peeve when the schedule comes out. Two things. This will be the first time ever we'll get a conference schedule of any kind when we know what the teams are ranked going into the season, at least based on Phil Steele or, whatever reputable source. Ohio State's number 1, Penn State's number 10, Wisconsin and Michigan are in the teens, and Iowa's in the 20s. What does that mean? How is that going to impact the schedule? And, I'm not asking for favoritism or anything, but, just don't put your number 1 ranked team behind the 8 ball. It's all I would say with your schedule when it comes out, because if you do that, people are going to be really upset with the Big Ten. And then the other thing is, do you match them? I looked it up. The 4 teams that they're not scheduled to play, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Minnesota, and Purdue, they all have 4 home games and 5 road games. So there's not one in particular that fits the mold. Ohio State could play any of those 4, I guess, if they maintain the schedule as written. And do they match them up with the highest ranked team from that division that's available, which would be Wisconsin? So I think a lot of fun stuff coming. And, like last year, Ohio State had to play Penn State the week before they played Michigan. That's not a good way to set that up. And if they come back with something similar to that this year, people are going to say, well, don't you want to put a team in the playoff? That'd probably be the question.
Yeah, I just real quick, Tony, can't imagine when Michigan State was really good, that happened to Ohio State in 2015. And then, of course, last year with Penn State right before the game. I just don't know how, with all the intricacies of the schedule, that the scheduler makers are just, working in line and don't see the big picture and look at that and think we need to do something about that.
And here's where that came in home to roost was, okay, it wasn't the Michigan game, but it was the Wisconsin game, the 3rd week in a row where they had to play a sledgehammer top 15 team, and they were no-show for 30 minutes of that game and had to stand on their head in the second half and basically shut out Wisconsin in the second half to win the game. That's where it came home to roost, was the stacking of those late season games. They should be playing Rutgers or Maryland or somebody the week before they play Michigan or a team like that. That's how it should be. I mean, it should be, we give Alabama and all those schools a bunch of crap for playing Citadel and Charleston Southern the week before. The Big Ten at least plays conference games, but nobody ever said it needed to be a good conference game. So, do no harm here with the scheduling there, whoever's in charge of it.
Well, and the SEC goes out of their way to protect their best teams with their scheduling in terms of, before rivalry weeks and things like that. The Big Ten says, I believe it's a computer that does theirs, and yet Ohio State always plays Penn State at night because it's early enough in the season, and it plays at Penn State at night. And this last year, Penn State was at Ohio Stadium, late in the season, so there's no opportunity for a night game there because nobody really wants a night game that late. But yeah, in 15 and 19, both Michigan State and Penn State were ranked 9th in the nation, and really were done no favors by the Big Ten. And this is an opportunity for the Big Ten to do Ohio State and Penn State some favors. But just from talking to Gene Smith, maybe now they're starting to think about the playoffs in the postseason outside of Ohio or outside of the Big Ten. But just from when we talked to him, and it was a long time ago now because nothing has happened in 3 weeks since we last talked to Gene Smith. Like the playoffs are the furthest thing from his mind.
Yeah.
And you wonder, maybe it's closer now that they've got some more things figured out. But, they're going to throw it in a computer again, see how it shakes out. Maybe take it to some teams to, would you mind this schedule? Is this schedule okay? And it's like, no, because we still need a home game or whatever. And who knows how much back and forth there is. Iowa or Nebraska's AD won in 12 conference games. Gene Smith said everybody else probably okay with 10. Like the first week of them trying to figure out the schedule may have just been complaining back and forth and trying to decide how many games. And then the second week is, okay, now let's build a schedule. And then the third week is, okay, now let's fix it because people are complaining. And it's like, well, as Gene Smith said, don't get hung up on the fairness of your schedule. Just be happy that your student athletes can go out there and play.
Don't get hung up.
Right. That's easy for him to say, having the best team in the conference. It's not so much, imagine, Greg Schiano doesn't want to have to play a murderer's row of the Big Ten East all right in a row or whatever. And I'm sure neither does Lovie Smith or whomever. And Jim Harbaugh is he probably like an easier schedule as well. But you know what? Nothing is promised to you this year, so take whatever you can get.
Yeah. And as an example, Alabama never plays Georgia until this year. They're supposed to play them. And, the Big Ten tries to rotate those crossovers. Ohio State seems to play Nebraska on almost an annual basis right now. Now, obviously, they're not top of their program right now. And they have rotated Wisconsin in very regularly, who's been the class of that division since they went east and west. So, the Big Ten has not shied away, from challenging its teams or mixing up the matchups, unlike certain other conferences seem to be doing.
To answer a couple of questions about like the band, I don't think they've said whether the band would be out there or not, but we all count in the attendance. Whoever's in the stadium during a game counts towards that attendance. That's why you can have more than capacity because we're not all sitting in the seats. So yeah, I don't know. Since there's no skull session, does that mean that there still wouldn't be a band? I don't think so. I know they're trying to limit as many people on the sidelines as possible, but can you afford 10 to 12 cheerleaders? Probably. There's going to be so much limitations on everything. And as we've seen at Ohio Stadium, they have been, I wouldn't say eliminating, they've been downplaying the band for about the last decade in terms of you're having more music played through the PA. They could probably play band music through the PA or do it because they've been negating the band for years. And this would be the prime opportunity to finally get their way and get that stinking band out of there, it seems like.
Yeah, we had one game at Wisconsin probably 10 years ago. The Wisconsin band was suspended for hazing, and the Ohio State band didn't make the trip. So our friend Kevin Noon, who is noticeably absent today, coined that where the teams have no bands. They played the U2 song at the beginning, I want to run, that whole thing when Wisconsin came out on the field. And Kevin coined that night where the teams have no bands. So, yeah, that was practice for what we may have this year.
Are you a singer, Steve? That was pretty good. That was like
no, I'm not no.
That was similar to the real thing. Like it was recognizable. Like it was.
I'm no Bono.
Okay.
Bono is a friend of mine, and you, sir, are no Bono.
Timely reference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we talk Ohio State football with these two, and typically Kevin Noon, as Steve had just alluded to, but we got Steve Hellwagon, of course, on the line from Bucknuts, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeyes Scoop, and invite you to join their staffs and their work on their respective sites as they, of course, cover Ohio State football on a daily basis. And when you bring up the band, who comes to mind for me is Jim Tressel. So I think we can all only go back to Woody Hayes at the most. He would have to be, I'm not going to put a year on it, but rather aged to remember anyone before Coach Hayes in 1951. So even to go back to Woody Hayes has now been quite some time. But it seemed to be really Jim Tressel who said, we're going to get back to some traditions here. We're going to, of course, sing the Carmen, Ohio at the end of the game and kind of bring the band back into the culture of the football team.
Yeah. It was really kind of cool. He always put the band on a pedestal, and he and the director at that time, I think, was it Waters? John Waters may have been the director then. They were like joined at the hip with all their initiatives and everything, and the band was a big part of the program. And he would say things like, for us to be on the same field as that band. That's the kind of pedestal that he put the band on. And they even came up with a new fanfare for the team to come out, when he became the coach. And he started the tradition of the players walking from the hotel at the Blackwell Inn across the street through St. John Arena to the Skull Session. I know you had a question. What is the Skull Session? That is a pregame concert in the old basketball arena across the street from Ohio Stadium. where for some games they'll get 10,000 people inside the old basketball arena to watch typically it's a high school band or the opposing team's band if they travel, plus the Ohio State band. But the highlight is somewhere around an hour and 45 minutes before the game is supposed to kick off, the team walks down to the main floor. The coach, the head coach, which has been Jim Tressel, Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, or now Ryan Day, says a few words to the crowd. It could be if they're playing Penn State, hey, we got a big one today. Michigan, it doesn't get any bigger than this. We need you today, that type thing. And then maybe one player, a captain or somebody will get up and say a few words as well. They'll play the fight song and they go up the other side toward the stadium. I mean, they're not in there more than about 6-7 minutes and they are gone, if that. And they usually have all their recruits follow along on that. So the recruits get to experience that whole walk from the hotel into the basketball arena and then across the street through the fans, through, as you see a lot of these SEC schools, they have those tunnels where the players and the coaches walk through those tunnels to get to the stadium. Clemson and some of those places do that. Ohio State does it it's probably about a 200 or 300-yard walk, maybe from St. John Arena across the street into the north entrance where the stained glass is there at the stadium, the rotunda. The team will walk into that, then walk down the ramp, walk the length of the field. And Urban Meyer made it a tradition for him to be down near the goal line where they go into the locker room, and he would shake the hand and hug every guy as they were going in to get dressed, for the game, so that he would have a physical eye-to-eye contact with every player on the team going in to the locker room to get ready for the game. So it was, we see at Michigan State the whole thing with Michigan a few years ago where they lock arms and walk. I'm trying to do that in my little window. Walk arms and go down the field, and they run into Devin Bush. Well, that's Michigan State's tradition. Ohio State's tradition is they almost walk single file through the crowd and then down the field and meet the coach and then go get ready. So I hope that answers his question about the skull session. The band usually plays for about 45 minutes. The other band, either a high school band or the opposing team's band, will play for a few songs as well. And then it breaks up about an hour before the game and everybody can dissipate and go to the stadium.
I remember in 2018 when Urban Meyer returned from his suspension. Like, the media doesn't always go over to the skull session, but I think pretty much everybody went over for that one because, that was going to be the fans' first opportunity to welcome him back. It was going to be his first opportunity to speak to everybody. And so,
good to hell back.
Exactly. You're looking up at the ramp, like waiting for him to come down. And as soon as you hear people saying he's coming, then just the buzz around the stadium begins. And then once they see him, obviously they erupt. And if you've never done it, you should just go to skull session once and say you've done it. If it's your thing, you probably won't miss it again. If it's not your thing, you've said you've done it. It can be a little warm there in September. Just be prepared. It's St. John Arena, so it's not air conditioned. There are no ceiling fans. It's just going to be a little bit warm.
St. John Arena.
Yeah, it would not be the place to be this year with 13,276 in there. No. But it is a neat thing if you're into the band. I think every single Ohio State freshman at some point has a CD or they used to of the band, or a record of Steve, or a cassette tape, or MP3s now, of course, or just streaming, whatever. But you get it inculcated to the marching band pretty early on, and it's something to have in your rotation, the music from the band.
It's something for parents if they're taking kids who are probably 5 to 10 years old to their first game. That's something that you want to go and do because you can sit down and enjoy the music and all the excitement and see the team and everything else come through. It's something to kind of occupy that time before the game. If you're not inclined to stand out at a tailgate party or don't have a comfortable place to be before the game and can't get in the stadium, that quickly. But you do need to get there 2.5 hours before the game starts to get your seat, because the lower bowl does fill up. Again, we won't need this information until 2021, I guess. But the lower bowl does fill up pretty quickly.
But I'll also say, anytime you can spend some time in St. John Arena, take advantage of it.
Historic.
Yeah, Tony, as soon as you said 13,276, I had a circuit and one of my brain cells just go off and be like, yeah, that was the
that was the magic number.
Mm-hmm. Every game.
Get this phone out of here. There we go. Yeah, that was the number, 13,276. Yeah, St. John's Arena. And if you sat in the upper deck, you really hung over the basketball court.
It's a great place. I had season tickets there for a couple of years behind the opposing coaches bench, and the great coaches that came through the Big Ten in the mid 90s. I mean, it was ridiculous, and it was great fun, and it was good basketball. Not the Ohio State teams, mind you, weren't very great. I know one year Ohio came in and beat them. I think one year they lost at Toledo. So it wasn't the best of times, but it was still fun.
Yeah.
I remember those Eldon Miller teams, of course. Those were the first taste of Ohio State basketball. They were a little hit or miss. I certainly loved that Ronnie Stokes, Troy Taylor backcourt that was together for, it seemed like forever for a college
4 years.
basketball.
Yep, they played together for 4 years.
Good to see Mark Thibodeau on the line. Mark, just because you're the enemy, that had to be stated in caps. I love your program and subscribed months ago. Geez, when will my team Michigan ever beat the Buckeyes? And if not, when will they fire Harbaugh? Somebody else later mentioned Pinero 5 Piru that maybe they should fire Don Brown. With the situation being what it is across the country with this wildcard season, I got to think that most coaches are a little safer than they typically would be. But do you guys think, going forward from 2021 on, do you guys have any lean on what it's going to take for Michigan to either get over the hump, or what's Harbaugh's final straw going to be?
I'm deferring to the Michigan Monday expert, Tony Gerdeman, to give the first answer, and then I'll share my thought.
Well, it will be interesting to see if Jim Harbaugh signs an extension here shortly, and what that extension is. If it's like a 7-year extension, then I wouldn't expect him to be fired after Ohio State beats them in 2021. If it's not a huge extension, like the next year is the year that I have been looking at for Jim Harbaugh. If they lose that one, because you assume they'll lose in Columbus, and that was before any pandemic or whatever. You just don't expect him to come in here and beat this Ohio State team. But if they were to lose next year, then that's what? Is that 6-7 losses in this rivalry, from 2015 to then 2021?
Yeah, it'd be 7 for him,
7.
and 10 in a row overall.
And that's unacceptable. And it's not like what he's doing, 9-3, 10-2, 8-4. It's fine. And honestly, it's about what any other Michigan head coach has ever done. And that's kind of the problem, where Michigan is seen as something like they should be in a national title hunt year in, year out, but that's not who they are. And maybe they haven't been that since maybe sometime in the mid 80s, even though Bo Schembechler never actually got them there, but they had some good teams. But it wasn't – I don't know what he's trying to live up to, or that he hasn't lived up to what he's supposed to be, or what Michigan is. And that's where I always come back to, like, this is what Michigan is. They're 9 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins in a great year, but they don't have very many of those. You can go back and look at Ohio State's 11-win season since Jim Tressel took over. And I'm assuming Ohio State has had more since 2001 than Michigan has had all time, because their best years were, when they were playing 9 games in a year back in the 20s. So I still think Michigan could be more, because I think Jim Harbaugh could be doing more, and making your recruiting pipeline the Northeast isn't. What's that going to do? And you got to be national, and you've got to be in Ohio, you've got to be in the Midwest, and they're reaching on so many guys, and they don't have nearly the depth they need. They wear down on the defensive line against Ohio State in the fourth quarter every year, and they wear down in November every year. and they don't have the depth up front on either side. You can go through, and I actually did this the other day. Like, look at at Michigan's roster right now. Who would you start on Ohio State's roster? Nico Collins, maybe Dax Hill as the slot corner, Jalen Mayfield at right tackle, I suppose. Cameron McGrone maybe at middle linebacker, but Ohio State has 7 middle linebackers that can play. There's just not a lot of guys that you would take and put in Ohio State's starting lineup for Michigan's team.
Yeah, you hit all the high points. From an objective standpoint, 15 years now, 15 seasons, no Big Ten championships, the longest drought in Michigan football history. It never happened before that they've gone 15 seasons between Big Ten championships. And so that'll tell you that, what's portraying Michigan football now is not the way it's been decade over decade for years. And a lot of reasons for it: Rust Belt, people, migrating south, football, just Midwest football, just not producing the same level of talent as other places, and Michigan hasn't capitalized on it. We've talked about it on the show before. What NFL quarterback have they produced since Tom Brady or Chad Henne? Zero, none, none. And that is where a lot of this begins and ends. Even though JT Barrett wasn't an NFL quarterback, he's on a roster, I guess, as a practice player, I think with the Pittsburgh Steelers I saw the other day. But, again, he was a great college player and certainly a better college quarterback than anybody they've had since Chad Henne. So, I don't know what to say. I think he's the best choice for them. I think, like Luke Fickell, in a lot of ways, he's been dealt a poop sandwich and made to eat it in front of the world. I say that because Fickell was handed a team with 5 guys under suspension who were all starters for half or most or all the season, and told go try and beat Wisconsin and Michigan and some of these teams that were really good that year. I think from Harbaugh's standpoint, he's run into the buzzsaw of the greatest 6, 7, 8 year period in Ohio State football history in terms of wins and any way you want to chalk it up: NFL production, All-Americans, All Big Ten, etc. This has been the glory run for Ohio State. He's run into the most talented collection of Ohio State football teams that have ever existed in a period of time, and that takes in a lot of real estate. So to me, that's been his uphill battle, and he's won most of the other games. Have they doinked off a game or two here or there? Yeah, sure, but at the same time, he's won a lot of games against a lot of other opponents. You just can't beat Ohio State. Can't win a bowl game, obviously. You see last year, they don't even factor against Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. And I don't know. I just think that a lot of the interest, a lot of the excitement, a lot of the luster of Michigan football has been worn away. And yet every year they try and prop them up and put them in the top 10. And every year they barely finish in the top 25. And, it's just kind of a lather, rinse, repeat cycle that they're on. And, Andy Geiger made a comment, the former athletic director from Ohio State years ago, that, yeah, it's healthy to not like your rival and to look down on them and hope bad for them. But at the same time, you're as good as the company that you keep. And when, Ohio State has had great teams, it's in large part because they've beaten great Michigan teams. Think about 2006. That put them in the championship game, obviously. A few years ago, 2016, that put them in the playoff, beating a number 3 ranked Michigan team, and so on and so forth. So, I know Ohio State fans revel in Michigan's demise and what this has been like for them. But I think deep down, I think people are hoping that we at some point get back to where we don't know what's going to happen the last Saturday in November. But sadly for them, it's Ohio State usually favored by 8, 9, 10 points and winning by 20.
And just looking at Phil Steele magazine, as always, to my left here, I think real quickly I looked, and Jim Harbaugh is 1-7 on the road against ranked teams at Michigan, and that's Wisconsin, that's Notre Dame, that's Penn State. Fortunately, it's not Rutgers, because they're not ranked. But I'm wondering, Steve, you mentioned we always know what's going to happen at the end of November. Like this year might be like the fourth Saturday in September. And I wonder what would be the best week for Michigan to play Ohio State.
Yeah. I've got a thought about that, and I had a thought about something else. Let me give my thought about the scheduling, first of all, and then if I can remember, my mind is so scattered that what I just thought of 20 seconds ago, I've already forgotten it. But regarding the scheduling, I put this on Twitter. I said they have to have 13 weeks worth of games for television, for Big Ten Network, which they own, as well as the Fox contract, ABC, ESPN, Fox Sports 1, etc. They got to space the games out. And to protect against cancellations, this was my proposal, is for the Thanksgiving Saturday, the last Saturday of the regular season, they could almost just put Purdue against Indiana and Illinois against Northwestern, and those would be your games that weekend. Ohio State, Michigan could be, quote, scheduled the week before, and then if they have to push it back, you could play it Thanksgiving weekend, I guess. But that's probably what I would do, is put some meaningless games Thanksgiving weekend that won't impact the schedule. Sorry, Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, and Northwestern, but your two rivalry games came to mind first, and put those games on the old oaken bucket, baby. Nothing better than that on Thanksgiving weekend, and play those quote meaningless Big Ten regular season games that week, and you still have a week buffer in there in case there's a cancellation. You could put Ohio State, Michigan back week. That's how I would do it, and then structure everything else out from there. My other thought, and if I think of it, I'll butt in and say it, but I'm sure it had something to do with Michigan and Harbaugh.
Well, maybe something I say, Steve, will prompt you. But,
my memory, yeah.
My 2 cents on Michigan.
Oh, I got it.
Go to it, Steve. We better get this in, or you're going to lose it again.
Well, I'm thinking about it. Mark asked, what would it take for Harbaugh to be on the hot seat? And I think it's pretty simple. As Tony has said, they're 9-3 every year. But I know Phil Steele in his book, somebody quoted him on Twitter saying he thinks Indiana could actually knock off Michigan this year, that Indiana is that talented, unless Michigan has that answer at quarterback, which they've got a couple of guys vying for that position, that they're vulnerable to losing to an Indiana. And that's the kind of thing I think that would finally wake everybody up from their slumber up there in Michigan and say, wow, the Emperor has no clothes, if he were to doink off a game to an Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, I wouldn't say Illinois because they beat Wisconsin last year. Well, Illinois, Purdue, I don't know who they have to play in the crossovers, but you get my drift. Is they're now 8-4 because they lost to a below, a perceived lower level Big Ten team. Then he's got a problem. And I think
he hasn't lost that game yet. No, he was losing to Michigan State when they were still Michigan State. He's losing to Penn State basically every other year. They got blown out by Wisconsin. He lost to Iowa when they pulled off a big upset in 2016. Those are the games that he's lost to capable Big Ten teams.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents on Michigan would be, unfortunately, if we're just looking at the last 50 to 60 years and not going back to prehistoric days, the height of Michigan football might have been in the mid 70s when they ran into Ohio State, and they lost a tie game to a certain extent when they were obviously not sent to the Rose Bowl in favor of the Buckeyes repeating and going to the Rose Bowl, when they went on that ridiculous run of losing like 3 games in 4 years leading into the game, and just not having that opportunity because Ohio State was that good, and them losing very close games to Ohio State and going 0-3-1 during that 4-year stretch against Ohio State when they were a top 5 team in the nation. It was almost similar to what Steve pointed out happening over in the last 7 to 8 years, except Michigan hasn't been as close by any stretch as that team was in the mid 70s. And then I don't want to say they took over the Big Ten, but they and Ohio State were neck and neck for the most part. Illinois jumped up, Iowa jumped up, and some other teams between the late 70s and the early 90s. But Michigan by far made the most Rose Bowls. But to Tony's point, they never arrived at the Rose Bowl in competition for a national championship. They arrived at the Rose Bowl typically 9-2. That was typically the Michigan season, arriving with a nice season, winning the Big Ten, lost a non-conference game, showed up 9-2, ranked 8th or 9th in the country, won or lost, typically lost the Rose Bowl. I believe Bo was 2-8 in the Rose Bowl, and that was the Michigan football season. They jumped up to share a national championship in 97. They were in position in 06 as an undefeated team in Columbus that lost by 3 points in a classic to Ohio State to get it done. But other than those 2 years, they've been a top 15 program for the better part of 50 years.
Yeah, like any other top 15 program, every now and again, you're going to vie for a national championship in the final couple of weeks of the season. That, we've seen Georgia Tech win a national title. Colorado, they both split in 1990. So it's like, yeah, even those teams, those programs have as much of a trophy case almost as Michigan. And speaking of Michigan's trophy case right now, if you look at it, the most recent thing in there is a co-division championship in a year where they lost to Ohio State.
Steve brought up Phil Steele. Phil Steele recorded with us a couple of days ago. Please check that preview on the college football season now. Great discussion with Phil Steele for about 15 to 20 minutes. And also we do a segment called the 10-Minute War with Steve Dace of Michigan Podcast. Steve hit me with a ton of trends around college football to get my take on those. So please check out that segment that's going to be released here in the next 2 days. Our Michigan friend Mark comes back with "I hate the Buckeyes, but Rogers," and the key phrase or term that I see that jumps out to me is should have a zillion like hits. Man, Mark, if you can make that happen, it would be tremendous. So we'll keep grinding here. All right, talking Ohio State football with these two: Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hillwagon from Bucknuts.
I do wonder, Mark, Michigan is scheduled to go to Minnesota this year. Like, if that gets changed, like, how many of these teams are going to have an easier schedule in conference play after what happens? Like, I know Gene Smith has said you hope you can keep the schedule that you have. You just might have to move some dates around. But there could be some teams that maybe they come out with an even easier schedule than they went in with. Because Michigan's schedule right now, I don't having Wisconsin at home, going to Minnesota. I would pick Minnesota in that one. It's scheduled for midseason, but who knows when it's going to be. Like that would not be a good season opener for Michigan with a new starting quarterback and 4 new offensive linemen when Minnesota's got a pretty veteran team. They lost, Tyler Johnson, a receiver, but like it will be, if the Big Ten ever releases a schedule, it will be interesting to see these season openers because there's a lot of teams in flux right now. And like Jim Harbaugh needs a schedule that he can work with. If the Big Ten can do him some favors, he would appreciate it. But I don't know.
I think the difference in the Harbaugh hire, in addition to evaluating him as just another Michigan coach who should go 9-3, and that's pretty much what he's done, is that they're paying him at the level that they're expecting national championships.
Yeah, that doesn't go unnoticed, I think, for a lot of people when they publish the list of the highest paid coaches, and his name is right there alongside Saban and Sweeney, and then there's Harbaugh, and you're like, as my good friend Terry Gilliam, who I bring him up all the time because he's a character, Tony, you could just picture him saying, "What's he ever done, Steve? What's he ever done?" So, yeah. I know you've got to be there to experience it, but you get the idea that pained expression and the bewilderment over why somebody has got something they clearly don't deserve, which I think is his salary in his case.
My approach to Big Ten scheduling, and I would throw it out the window this year because of the obvious situation going on, is, and I do this every year, is I look at the 3 teams that everybody in a particular division has to play on the other side, and I compare their records from the previous season. And it's typically not fair. It's not balanced. So they play 9 conference games, so that's 27 games for a particular 3-game set of opponents from the other side. So one team may have to play 3 teams that went 21-6 the previous season, and somebody else to the extent of 8-19 the previous season. And I just don't think that's fair in scheduling for 2 teams that are competing for the same division championship that's based on conference record. So my committee would balance that out. But of course, we'd look, okay, we can't have Ohio State and Purdue playing for the 5th consecutive year, and Ohio State and Illinois haven't seen each other in 8 years. So we would look at all those factors. But other than that, I would balance out. I'd start with that Indiana-Purdue game. They have to play. But after that, just look at the matchups and try to figure out a balanced schedule.
Yeah, because you can look at a schedule for any team and be like, well, there's no way they're going undefeated. And even I remember Alabama a few years back, they had a ridiculous road schedule. And it's like, well, they're not going undefeated with that schedule. And just, I think some balance would be good for that, where you shouldn't just be able to look at like for the top teams. You can look at Michigan's schedule and say they're not going undefeated. But for the good teams, we're talking about the really good teams, you shouldn't look at their schedule and be like, well, there's no way that they're not going to be able to get through all of that. It's like, well, what did they do to deserve this schedule? Like, how did this happen randomly?
The distinction, I'm going to offer up this question, though. So the Ohio State-Michigan game the last 2 years has been a complete embarrassment. The 2017 game was reasonably close. Actually, Michigan led in the second half. Dwayne Haskins comes in, pulls off a couple beautiful passes, one in particular to Austin Mack, and Ohio State runs away in the 4th quarter and wins by 11, but in a close game. 2016 obviously was razors tight, and I would argue that Michigan was the better team on the field. They didn't win the game, but they lost, obviously, in double overtime. The 15 game, Michigan was really good, but Zeke Elliott went off, and that Ohio State team played up to its potential.
Finally.
Penn State for 3 straight years. Now, take last year's game. It took Ohio State bumbling around for the span of 5 or 6 minutes on offense to hand them the ball to keep them in the game or get them back in the game from 21-0 to 21-17. But Penn State played Ohio State closer than anyone in the regular season. But the 2 previous years, Penn State outplayed them for 55 minutes. Penn State and Michigan are basically the same teams in the same programs right now. They're both 8-12 every year in the rankings. They've swapped wins against each other, and they're basically both going 10-2. Generally, their records are almost mere images of each other. Why is Ohio State having issues with Penn State and they are obliterating Michigan?
I think Penn State has more talent, has a better talent base as well in recruiting base. And it comes down to recruiting. And James Franklin is the better recruiter. He's the more active staff. And I think that will continue to build. And you got to watch out. Like, I don't think Michigan is the number 2 program in the Big Ten East. I think Penn State is. I think they've proven that. And I don't know that we're talking about what can Michigan do to keep up with Ohio State. Michigan has to worry about Penn State right now. Like, Jim Harbaugh was able to move past Mark D'Antonio, which was a question mark for a while. But now he's got to catch up with James Franklin. And I don't know if he can. I mean, you just watch him, and maybe this year will rejuvenate him and relight some fires. I'm sure it's going to do that for a lot of people because everybody's missing the sport right now. And I'm sure he missed his guys while everybody was away. But he's there's just, and I've said this for a while, there's like no joy there. He's not, he doesn't portray himself as being happy to be coaching football and to be coaching at Michigan, and his players don't look happy. And that's not a good place to be when you've succumbed to the fact of where you are rather than that has overcome your determination to make it something better than when it was when you arrived, or something better than it could be right now. And yeah, I'm sure he's trying to, but he could also try harder.
It's a dire and bleak enough place already. Back.
So to back you up here, Tony, even though I framed them as equals, Penn State's 4.5 games better since 2016. They played an extra game because of the Big Ten championship game. They're 4.5 games better. 5 in the win column, 4 in the loss column. So doesn't sound like much, but over 4 years, that's going 10-2 instead of 9-3. And that's finishing 7th or 8th in the country versus finishing 14th or 15th in the country.
Like, did anybody think Michigan had a chance against Alabama last year? No. So that's a statement right there as well, where you just know, like, this is not a good idea. Like when they played them, didn't they play them a few years ago in the season opener? It's like, this is not a good idea. This is terrible. Was that Brady Hoke back then? So the talent gap, and I know Steve Dace has talked about that quite a bit on his own shows, but the gap with Ohio State and Michigan is big. The gap with Michigan and Penn State is getting bigger, and as I keep saying, recruiting the Northeast, like the far Northeast, isn't going to fix the situation for Michigan.
There you have it. Dale Sherm asking, does every major publication have Ohio State favored to win the Big Ten? Well, unlike last year, I believe so. Where last year it was just incomprehensible that Ohio State was given like a 7% chance to beat Michigan and win the Big Ten, or whatever the numbers were. It was just ludicrous.
That with the college, I don't remember which national sports network it was, Mark. With their
who could that have been? Who could that have been?
Could have been anybody.
Hey, I got one. I'm now on the rant because they're already starting this. We're going to play 12 games, and they're only playing 10 stuff. And I got news for you. When Alabama's 2 extra games, or Citadel and Charleston Southern or somebody, they don't count. Yeah. It's your best 10 games against Power 5 competition, and eyeball test. Give me the best 4 teams. They're already jockeying for position. The SEC, the ACC, I guess the ACC announced an 11-game schedule here just minutes ago, where everybody can play 10 conference games in one. That protects their in-state rivalry games that they wanted to protect with the SEC teams, etc. But they're already starting to position themselves. And I said, don't let Reese Davis is the one who's famous for this, sneaking these little nuggets in there that are anti-Big Ten, anti-Ohio State all the time on College Game Day or the Thursday night show or the halftime show or whenever, College Game Day, or whenever he can sneak them in under the transom, he throws them in there. Remember this scheduling thing. This benefits the SEC. Well, they're going to try and pull that, and I think everyone needs to understand that this is not a normal year, and if they even play one game. So don't let them get away with it, because their extra games are against meaningless opponents. They're glorified personal appearances that are masqueraded as actual regular season games. They don't count. They don't mean anything, and they shouldn't count, and they shouldn't mean anything.
There you have it.
Sorry if I got you fired, Mark. I'm sorry.
You really? Well, we shall see.
Another thing.
Don't let them tell you.
Well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop because I was about to say something. All right, we'll stop right there. That's a good place to stop the show and maybe re-edit and repost.
Only the live viewers saw that rant.
There you go. All right, folks. Good time as always with these two: Tony Gerdeman, Buckeyes Scoop, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, talking up the Buckeyes and Ohio State football, and still awaiting a Big Ten schedule for 2020. The ACC apparently released. The Big Ten, we're still awaiting. Guys, we appreciate you stopping by. Have a great rest of your week.
All right, take care.
And to the person asking about Sean Wade, don't worry about him. He'll be fine. #1 corner.
Yep.